This is Rainy Night Horrors. Outside, the storm brews, and with it comes something darker. Every drop masks a sound, every shadow holds a shape. You're not imagining it. You're hearing the truth. Listen closely. It's already here. The air pressed down, thick and unfamiliar, as Silas stepped from the cab of his pickup. His first inhalation was a labor, lungs tightening against the palpable weight. 30 yards distant, veiled by sentinel pines and cloaked in a shroud of sodden leaves, stood the cabin. Fog clung low, swirling about the tree trunks like spectral gauze beneath a sky of bruised pewter. Solitude was the lure. Silence, the sought-after balm. He carried no agenda beyond the clearing of his mind, the quiet scratching of pen in journal, the meditative glow of evening fires. Never did he anticipate the insidious presence that would coil around his nerves for days, nor the gnawing question of whether his isolation was truly absolute. His duffel slung over one shoulder, a small cooler clutched in his left hand, Silas mounted the porch. The steps groaned their protest, timbers feeling unnervingly frail beneath his boots, a tactile echo of the uncertainty blooming within him. The front door resisted, scraping a harsh complaint across the floorboards as it yielded. Inside, the sparse furnishings swam into view. A table flanked by 2 chairs, a rudimentary kitchen counter beside a sink whose faucet wept rust, a narrow corridor vanishing towards a lone bedroom. The pervasive scent of damp wood and time-settled dust bit at his nostrils. He deposited the cooler near the table, let the duffel slump to the floor in a corner, and paused, catching his breath. Relief warred with a persistent disquiet. Settling in would soothe it, he assured himself. A cursory check of the windows revealed loose latches. With a shrug, he cinched them tight. Though company was unexpected, the illusion of security was a small comfort. The cabin boasted only a single deadbolt on the front door, a cheap mechanism he tested repeatedly, ensuring it moved without sticking. Late afternoon found him circumnavigating the cabin's perimeter. The earth gave soggily underfoot, releasing the rich, cloying perfume of decay. Verdant overgrowth pressed in on all sides, save for a slender track that snaked deeper into the woods. A faint rustling whispered from the dense foliage. Though nothing moved within his line of sight, the fine hairs on his arm lifted. The silence felt unnaturally profound, punctuated only by the sporadic, dry snap of a distant twig. Squirrels, perhaps, or unseen birds. Yet a knot tightened in his gut. That first evening, he coaxed a small blaze to life in the hearth. Flames leaped and crackled, their warmth a welcome caress on his face. Outside, the wind gathered voice, keening through unseen gaps in the window frames. Supper was canned soup, sipped directly from the pot. An ache bloomed in his lower back from the unforgiving chair, but he willed his muscles to slacken, staring into the firelight that danced upon the log walls, chasing elusive peace. His reflection flickered in a dark window pane, eyes distant, strained. Then a sound from outside, soft as exhaled breath, a low murmur. He froze, breath held captive in his chest, listening with an intensity that strained his ears. Silence returned. He released the trapped air, attributing the phantom sound to the wind's caprice. Thirst roused him near 3 in the morning. The bedroom air lay heavy, stagnant, prompting him to open the door and step into the main room. Dying embers cast a sullen, ruddy glow, barely sketching the shapes of table and chairs from the gloom. And then he heard it again, a susurrus, indistinct and low, seeming to seep through the cabin's rear wall. He stopped dead. His gaze swept the shadowed space, hunting for movement, heart hammering against his ribs, scalp prickling, a tremor starting in his hands. He stood rooted, half-conscious, breath held once more. Slowly, deliberately, he forced himself toward the back window. He pressed close, attempting to pierce the darkness, but saw only his own face mirrored back, stark and apprehensive. The whispering ceased. He remained there a long minute, chest constricted, before finally fetching a glass of water, gulping it down, and retreating to bed. Had he dreamt it? The question lingered, but the visceral unease refused to dissipate. Morning arrived late. Silas brewed coffee on the antiquated stove, throwing open windows to the damp chill, welcoming the brighter, albeit overcast light. A granola bar served as breakfast before he ventured outside to inspect the cabin's surroundings. Near the back wall, pressed deep into the yielding mud, was a set of footprints, not his own. They suggested heavy boots, human in shape. He traced their path for several yards until they vanished beneath the thick carpet of fallen leaves. A tension seized his arms. His head swiveled constantly, scanning the perimeter. The sensation of being watched intensified, a palpable pressure despite the utter absence of visible observers. He stood for a long while, gaze fixed on the impenetrable tree line, pondering the possibility of another presence lurking within the woods. The remainder of the day was spent hauling firewood from a dilapidated shed tucked behind the cabin. The logs were heavy with moisture, soaking through his gloves, igniting a burn in his shoulders and back. The woods remained alive with small, sharp sounds, snaps and cracks that ceased the instant he paused to listen. A frustrated anger began to simmer beneath his anxiety, directed at the relentless tension gripping his own body. His throat felt constricted. He swallowed repeatedly against the feeling. The urge to shout into the trees, to challenge whatever presence lingered there, rose and fell within him, but he held his tongue. He resolved to keep the door bolted, even in daylight. The precaution felt absurd, yet undeniably necessary. By the second night, a distinct cold had settled in. He built the fire early, positioning himself close to the flames, a heavy blanket draped over his knees, a flashlight resting within easy reach. Around 9, the whispering returned. It wasn't the wind this time. It drifted through the window seams like a low, sibilant chant, possessing a cadence, a deliberate rise and fall that sent prickles across his skin. His heart began a frantic drumming. Rational explanations warred with rising dread. Standing abruptly, he snatched the flashlight and threw open the front door. The night air struck his face like an icy palm. He swept the beam across the porch, the steps, the shadowed space beneath the eaves. Nothing. Then, angling the light towards the blackness between the trees, he caught it. A flicker of movement, a silhouette, perhaps 6 or 7 yards away, partially obscured by thick trunks. He jerked the flashlight, trying to pin it, but the beam found only textured bark. His pulse roared in his ears. His palms grew slick with sweat. He clamped his jaw against the chatter of his teeth, holding the light steady, desperately hoping for another glimpse. Wind rustled the high branches, but the figure had vanished. He took a hesitant step off the porch, but his legs felt suddenly unreliable, shaky. The feeling of unseen eyes boring into him was almost physical, yet proof remained elusive. Retreating inside, he slammed the deadbolt home and, mimicking scenes from old films, wedged a chair beneath the doorknob. His breathing came ragged and harsh. He paced the small space before collapsing at the table, mind racing, fingers drumming a nervous rhythm on the worn wood. The chanting had faded, or perhaps his own internal clamor drowned it out, but the image of that fleeting shape burned behind his eyes. Water sloshed from the glass as his trembling hand brought it to his lips. Sleep, when he finally sought it in bed hours later, was a distant shore, unreachable. He lay awake, listening to the wind's assault on the cabin walls, skin damp with cold sweat. Every creak and groan of the old structure making him flinch. Day 3 dawned gray and exhausted. Silas woke with stinging eyes to the drumming of a light drizzle on the roof. He decided to investigate the narrow path he'd noticed earlier, hoping it might lead to a stream or clearing. Pulling on a jacket, boots, and hat, flashlight tucked securely at his belt, he stepped out into the damp morning. The path was choked with wet undergrowth. Branches lashed at his face and arms as he pushed forward. After 15 minutes of sudden progress, he stumbled into a small clearing. In its center sat a ring of stones. No ashes, no charring indicated a recent fire, yet the deliberate arrangement of the stones radiated an immediate wrongness. The hairs on his nape prickled. Crouching beside the circle, he examined the stones more closely. They were stained with something dark brown, crusted and dry. He touched one gingerly. A sticky residue clung to his fingertip. He snatched his hand back, wiping it furiously on the wet grass, his stomach churning. The air hung thick with the smell of damp earth, mingled with another fouler odor that made him recoil. As he started to rise, a sudden flurry of whispers erupted directly behind him. Dozens of voices, it seemed, braided into a single chilling sound. His pulse hammered in his ears. Whirling around, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom, he saw only the dripping trees. His breath hitched, loud and ragged in the quiet clearing. He began backing away from the stone circle, eyes darting frantically, trying to watch every direction simultaneously. A primal urge screamed at him. "Run!" He turned and plunged back down the path, stumbling over slick roots and unseen rocks, nearly falling several times. A branch tore his jacket sleeve, but he barely registered it, consumed by the desperate need for the cabin's flimsy sanctuary. He burst onto the porch, breath tearing at his raw throat, and slammed the door shut behind him, fumbling with the lock. His legs felt like water. Pressing his forehead against the cool wood of the wall, he fought to regain control of his breathing, gripping the door frame until his knuckles turned white, feeling the cold sweat trace paths down his back. The nature of the sticky residue haunted him, a question he dared not answer. His mouth was parched, his hands afflicted with an uncontrollable tremor. He resolved to remain indoors for the duration of the day. The fireplace was kept fed, less for warmth than for its comforting presence. He left the lights burning. Restless, he paced the confines of the cabin, a caged animal, pausing frequently to peer through the windows. Outside, the drizzle persisted, tapping a monotonous rhythm against the roof. His mind endlessly replayed the footprints, the whispers, the silhouette glimpsed in the flashlight's glare. The tension in his body felt like a tightly wound spring, threatening to snap. Late afternoon found him dozing fitfully in the armchair near the fire. A sudden noise jolted him awake, scratching, insistent, against the cabin's side wall. Heart leaping, he seized the iron poker from the hearth and scrambled to his feet, knees knocking together. The sound emanated from the rear of the cabin near the bedroom, a rough, scraping cadence that lasted several seconds, then abruptly stopped. He held the poker like a club, creeping towards the bedroom window. Edging the curtain aside just enough to peer out, he scanned the dim, rain-slicked ground. Nothing. Then the scratching resumed, closer this time, seemingly right beneath the window ledge. His heart pounded a deafening tattoo against his ribs. He yanked the curtain shut, clenching the poker, whispering a frantic prayer for silence. After 10 agonizing seconds, it ceased. He stood frozen, holding his breath, straining his ears in the ensuing quiet. The waiting became unbearable. He slammed his fist against the wall. "Who's out there?" he yelled, his voice betraying a tremor. Silence answered him. That night descended, thick with dread. Sleep was impossible. Around midnight, lying rigid in bed, he listened intently, every nerve ending alight. The wind had fallen quiet, amplifying each subtle groan and pop of the aging structure. His back remained damp with sweat. A dull ache throbbed behind his temples. Intermittently, he thought he caught the faint, sibilant chanting from outside, the same low murmuring as before. His chest felt tight. He focused on counting breaths, trying to impose order on his fear. Morning. He would pack in the morning, he decided. Clarity and peace were forgotten aspirations. Escape was the only imperative. Then, near 2 a.m., footsteps sounded on the porch, unmistakable. The rhythmic groan of the floorboards under deliberate weight, the subtle shift as pressure moved from one plank to the next. He clutched the blankets, his mouth instantly dry. He lay utterly still, scarcely breathing. The steps halted directly outside the front door. He braced for a knock, another scratch, but only a heavy, pregnant silence followed. His heart hammered so violently it felt bruised against his ribs. Then a low voice began to hum or chant, guttural syllables in a tongue utterly foreign to him. His scalp crawled. Beneath the blankets, his hands shook uncontrollably. It lasted perhaps 30 seconds, an eternity measured in heartbeats. Then the footsteps retreated, the creaking boards fading into the oppressive silence. Sleep was now a ludicrous notion. He sat bolt upright, back pressed hard against the headboard, eyes fixed on the bedroom doorway. Sporadic whispers seemed to drift on the night air. Faint scrapes echoed from indeterminate distances. His arms ached with tension, his neck stiff. He remained vigilant, staring into the darkness, praying for the first hint of dawn. Morning light, gray and reluctant, finally filtered through the windows. Silas moved with frantic haste. Clothes were flung into the duffel, unfolded. Remnants of food were stuffed into the cooler. The blanket and other loose items were tossed onto the truck's back seat. He spared no time for tidying, no final check for forgotten trifles beyond a frantic pat-down for his wallet and phone. One last, sweeping glance around the cabin's interior, Then he bolted the door, scrambled into the truck, and turned the key. The engine roared to life, a comforting sound in the unnerving quiet. His hands trembled so violently on the steering wheel, he had to grip it tightly to maintain control. He navigated the muddy track away from the cabin, foot heavy on the accelerator. Branches screeched against the truck's paintwork. Tires spun momentarily on the slick ground, but he pressed onward, not easing up until he bumped onto the main road. Merging onto the highway, a measure of tension began to drain from his body. His shoulders eased fractionally. His breathing deepened, steadied. He glanced in the rearview mirror at the receding forest, a wave of profound relief washing over him. Yet his mind remained a turbulent storm of questions, replaying the whispers, the disembodied footsteps, the fleeting silhouette caught in his light. His heart still kicked at the memory, but each mile marker put between him and that place lessened the immediate terror. Whether hallucination or harrowing reality, he couldn't definitively say. He knew only this: the suffocating tension, the bone-deep fear, the inescapable feeling of being watched. Those sensations were undeniably real, leaving him profoundly shaken. He had sought quietude and found only shattered nerves, his hoped-for peace replaced by a haunting disquiet. The memory of the whispers, the feel of that clearing, these things were now etched into him, experiences he prayed fervently never to endure again. "6 months I'd spent threading the city's nocturnal veins, a chauffeur in the gig economy. Most nights dissolved into a predictable rhythm: pickups, drop-offs, the anonymous ebb and flow of faces in the rearview mirror. Unremarkable, the bulk of it. But one Tuesday stands apart, stark against the backdrop of routine. It was late, perhaps 10:30, the air unusually sharp for the season. Above the quiet neighborhood streets, the customary urban haze had inexplicably lifted, revealing a sparse confetti of stars, a rare sight. The app's chime drew me towards a summons near a dimly lit convenience store, a lonely beacon on a quiet block. Following the map's directive, I rolled toward the designated spot. No weekend reveler, no weary shift worker emerged from the shadows. Instead, my headlights isolated a solitary figure standing on the dark pavement beside an old, tired apartment building. He wore something dark, a jacket perhaps, and possessed an unnatural stillness, like a statue carved from night. Facing away from the bricks, his head was turned, gaze locked onto my approaching vehicle. No wave, no smile, just this unnerving, static presence. I eased the car to the curb, the engine a low hum in the quiet, and lowered the passenger side window. Up close, under the weak, flickering glow of a neglected street lamp, his face was impassive, not hostile, not welcoming, simply calm. Short, dark hair, the suggestion of a beard. He looked perhaps 40, though age seemed strangely irrelevant to his profound stillness. "Leo," I offered into the silence, my voice sounding louder than intended. "Your ride." He gave a single, economical nod, then opened the rear door and slid in behind me. The door clicked shut with a soft, definitive sound. Silence descended within the car, thick and immediate. I waited for a destination confirmation, a pleasantry, anything, nothing. The app displayed an address I didn't recognize, estimating a 15-minute journey eastward. About 15 minutes to get there, all right? I asked, more to fill the void than anything. From the back seat, his voice emerged, low and level, devoid of inflection. Yes. No scent of alcohol, no nervous energy, just an aura of profound containment. People were quiet sometimes, lost in thought, weary. I told myself this, starting the engine. We slipped through mostly deserted streets. Headlights occasionally flashed past in the opposite direction. Shop fronts were dark, the city settling into its late-hour slumber. The hum of the tires on asphalt, the whisper of my engine, the intermittent buzz of a streetlight. These were the only sounds. My passenger occupied the seat directly behind mine on the right. Glancing in the rear-view mirror, I noted his stillness again. He wasn't scrolling through a phone, wasn't watching the passing cityscape, wasn't fidgeting. His gaze seemed fixed straight ahead, perhaps on the upholstery of my headrest. It felt peculiar. Awkward rides were part of the job, yet this silence felt qualitatively different. At a stubborn red light, the quiet intensified. Slow night tonight, I ventured, a weak attempt to puncture the stillness. Several seconds elapsed before his quiet reply came, flat as the asphalt outside. It's fine. No elaboration, no change in tone. I nodded inwardly, focusing back on the road. The thought of turning on the radio surfaced, but I dismissed it. Somehow, music felt like it would only amplify the tension. The GPS route steered us steadily toward an older, less traveled part of town. The streets narrowed, flanked by aging buildings and shadowed lots, the streetlights growing sparser. I'd driven these roads before, but infrequently. Old houses stood sentinel, interspersed with patches of neglect, whispers of forgotten industry. We passed a derelict gas station, its sign fractured, pumps long since removed, a skeletal payphone booth standing nearby, its receiver violently torn away. Through it all, the man in my back seat remained utterly still, a silent observer, or perhaps oblivious to the decaying scenery. 10 minutes dissolved into the quiet hum of the journey. The destination marker on the app indicated less than a kilometer remaining. I eased off the accelerator. The area ahead was shrouded in darkness, save for a few distant, weak lights near what I vaguely recognized as old public grounds. My headlights swept across a high metal fence, tangled with untamed vines and shadowed by dense trees. A cold knot formed in my stomach as recognition dawned. A cemetery. The navigation insisted on a turn down a narrow lane running alongside its perimeter. A prickle of unease traced my spine, but who was I to question the destination? Maybe a groundskeeper's cottage lay hidden within, or a residence nearby. Making the turn, I followed the lane as it hugged the fence line, stopping precisely where the digital voice instructed. I shifted the car into park. We were beside a large, imposing iron gate, one side hanging partially open, offering a glimpse into the shadowed interior. Decrepit headstones listed at odd angles, interspersed with weathered statues, all swallowed by the deep darkness beneath overarching trees. The air felt tangibly colder here. Checking the rearview mirror again, I announced, "We're here." Silence answered. I turned my head slightly. "Sir?" Still nothing. His face was obscured by the angle and the gloom. My hand, betraying a slight tremor, fumbled for the interior light switch. A dim, pale glow illuminated the cabin. I looked into the back seat. It was empty, utterly, unequivocally empty. The seat cushion showed no indentation. The seatbelt lay neatly retracted, flush against the upholstery, as if it had never been disturbed. I leaned over the console, heart hammering, scanning the floor, the other side of the seat. Nothing. The doors remained locked, just as they had been throughout the trip. No alert had sounded. No mechanism had clicked. How? The question echoed in the sudden, profound silence. He couldn't have simply vanished. I hadn't heard a door open, felt no shift in the car's weight, no rush of air. The hairs on my arms prickled. My pulse throbbed in my temples. Shoving my door open, I stepped out onto the desolate lane, the cool night air doing little to calm me. I scanned left, right, up and down the narrow road. Empty. I circled the car, peering into the surrounding gloom. Nobody. Drawn by a morbid compulsion, I walked to the cemetery gate and peered through the bars. Only the faint outlines of monuments against the deeper black, a path obscured by dry, rustling leaves. I strained my ears. Nothing but the distant drone of unseen traffic, the whisper of a faint breeze through the ancient trees. No footsteps fading, no muffled sounds. Taking a step back towards the sanctuary of my car, I stood breathing shallowly, rapidly. Logic wrestled with the impossible reality. A trick of the light, exhaustion playing tricks. No. I'd seen him clearly, heard the door latch, heard his terse replies. He was real. Could he have slipped out silently, impossibly, at some point? But the doors were locked. The car would have signaled an opening, and I'd checked the mirror multiple times. He was there, until this exact spot, this terminus point dictated by the GPS, adjacent to the realm of the dead. The ground near the doors was a mix of gravel and fallen leaves. Surely an exit would produce some sound, and I had only just stopped. There'd be no interval, no distraction. It was inexplicable. I walked a few paces further down the lane, peering into the encroaching darkness where the pavement ended. Nothing but deeper shadow. Retreating, I slid back behind the wheel, hitting the lock button with unnecessary force. I sat for a long moment, the clamminess of my palms slick on the steering wheel. Checking the app, the ride was logged, completed. The passenger's name was utterly generic, lacking even a profile picture. I tried to reconstruct his face again, plain, unremarkable, except for that unwavering, almost cold stare. He hadn't moved, hadn't blinked much, hadn't once glanced at a phone. Too still. The sheer impossibility pressed down on me. A faint metallic creak emanated from the cemetery gate as the breeze stirred it, making me jump. I killed the interior light, plunging the cabin back into darkness, shifted into drive, and pulled away with deliberate slowness. My eyes darted constantly to the rearview mirror, half expecting his form to reappear in the vacant space. It remained empty. Turning onto a slightly wider, better lit street offered a small measure of relief, though my heart continued its frantic cadence. I wiped my sweating hands on my jeans, taking a deep, shaky breath. For several minutes, I drove without purpose, letting the familiar city streets drift past, trying to process the unprocessed. Report it? The absurdity of the scenario stopped me. My passenger evaporated at the cemetery gates. They'd think I was drunk, hallucinating, or worse. I pulled into the bright haven of an open gas station, parking near the pumps. where other cars offered a comforting presence. Inside the small store, I bought a soda, focusing on keeping my voice even, my transaction mundane. Leaning against the cool metal of my car under the fluorescent lights, I sipped the cold drink slowly. His voice echoed, low and toneless. Yes, it's fine. Why choose a cemetery? Why vanish? Questions without answers swirled. My shift wasn't over. Rent wouldn't pay itself. I checked the app for new requests, deciding to head towards the downtown hotspots, hoping for the mundane, bar patrons heading home, anything to dilute the strangeness. As I drove, my gaze kept straying to the empty back seat. It looked ordinary, dark fabric, a slight crease, yet it felt charged, haunted by the recent occupant. I turned the radio on low, needing the banal chatter of music to fill the void. About 20 minutes later, a ping, a middle-aged woman needing a ride from a restaurant. She talked about the weather, her long day at work. I responded, playing the part of the normal driver, pretending the last hour hadn't happened. Dropping her off felt blessedly ordinary. I worked for another hour, picking up a couple more fares, each blessedly uneventful. But the memory remained vivid. The man's impassive face, the suffocating silence, the graveyard terminus. I consciously steered clear of that entire quadrant of the city. Around 2 a.m, I called it a night, heading home through the now empty streets, my engine a solitary hum. Parking near my building, I scanned the shadows before getting out. Normal. Inside my apartment, lights on, door triple locked, I sank onto the couch. A dull ache lingered between my shoulder blades, a physical residue of the tension. I replayed every detail, the dark jacket, the unnerving stillness, the complete lack of phone use, so unlike typical passengers. How could a grown man simply cease to be inside a locked vehicle? It defied reason. Sleep offered little refuge initially. His face swam behind my closed eyelids. Eventually, sheer exhaustion pulled me under. Daylight brought a degree of detachment, though the unease remained. Coffee, routine, checking my phone. The trip was there in my history, logged like any other fare. Minimal payment, generic name. The pickup address was real, verifiable. Nothing outwardly suspicious in the data. I kept the experience to myself. Who would believe it? It sounded like a campfire tale, and I wasn't prone to believing in such things. I still don't know what happened that night. I only know what I saw, what I heard, and where the journey ended, after he vanished. Since then, that part of town is off limits to me after dark. A fare request originating near there? I let it pass. Someone standing too still, staring too intently at my approaching car. I keep driving. The story remains untold to passengers, locked away. But every detail is etched sharp, picking up a man, driving him in near silence to a cemetery gate, and arriving to find only emptiness. No explanation, no closure. Just me, the car, the memory of the open gate, and a lingering chill that reason cannot dispel. It happened. I move on. The memory of that first night in the Hill House is indelible. Darkness pooled in the living room where I sat, watching skeletal trees thrash against the window pane. A relentless wind clawed at the shutters, coaxing groans from the timber frame. My own frame felt taut, sinews humming, a desert blooming in my throat. Nerves, I reasoned. Simple acclimation anxiety. But as midnight breathed down the chimney, a different sound threaded through the gale, faint, warped, unsettlingly vocal. I canted my head, listening past the roar, my own pulse a frantic drum against my eardrums. In that instant, the certainty settled. Sleep would be a fugitive tonight. Compelled to investigate, I sought the porch. Its single bulb sputtered, casting epileptic light. The wind, raw and biting, sliced through my thin jacket. Each footfall on the boards felt deliberate, my gaze fixed downward. Only wind-tossed grass met my eyes initially. Then the gale veered, a physical blow that forced me against the railing for balance. I strained again for mundane explanations, a snapping branch, rattling tin. What reached me instead was a protracted whisper, too low for diction, a lingering shush that clung to the air. Darkness swallowed the yard. My flashlight beam pierced it futilely. Nothing visible stirred. A knot tightened low in my gut. Retreating inside, the deadbolt's click felt inadequate. Daylight brought a different kind of scrutiny. Behind the house, the hill tumbled towards a swath of high grass dotted with gnarled solitary trees. Nothing dense, just ancient trunks lifting twisted limbs to the sky. The ground yielded a dry crunch beneath my boots, peculiar after recent rains. The wind persisted, a softer but constant reminder, sighing past my ears. Then I saw them, peculiar inscriptions etched into the turf. Not animal tracks, but larger, deeper gouges, like something immense had dragged heavy talons. Curved lines and arcs repeated across several patches, each set spanning feet before abruptly vanishing. Kneeling, I pressed fingers into an impression. The earth beneath was loose, freshly disturbed. A disquiet bloomed. No breached fences, no sign of any conventional beast. Wind erosion? Root disturbance? The rationalizations felt hollow against the starkness of the shapes. That evening found me stationed by the window once more. As sunset bled across the horizon, the wind surged, bringing a sharp chill. I brewed coffee in the kitchen's defiant glare, hands betraying a slight tremor as I gripped the mug. Caffeine jitters, I told myself. Through the glass, the lawn rippled, grass bending in strange waves under the wind's punishing bursts. Trees swayed violently. Phantoms danced at the periphery of my sight, small darting shadows that evaporated upon focus. My heart began a frantic climb. Those unnerving marks flashed in my mind. Stay calm. I methodically secured every window, every door, then settled onto the couch, coffee clutched like a talisman. The wind screamed, louder now, and beneath its fury, the whispers returned, faint susurrations, like a multitude of low voices. Television offered no distraction. I resolved to make one final check outside, hunting for a rational source. A branch scraping shingles, perhaps. Heavier jacket donned, flashlight in hand, I stepped back onto the porch. The beam sliced the night, landing on the grass below. I descended the steps, feeling each plank groan. The instant my boots touched the lawn, I noted its dampness. The wind felt colder, coiling around me in sudden, fierce gusts. A faint rustling emanated from the trees. Then, caught in the light circle, a small, dark shape huddled near the yard's edge. It moved with a quick, jittery pulse, heart hammering against my ribs. I pinned the flashlight beam directly on it. The shape dissolved, vanishing as if into the very air. I stood rooted, breath soaring in my chest, scanning for its return. Nothing. A glacial chill traced my spine. My light swept the perimeter, a nervous sentinel beam against the whipping wind. A low hiss sounded directly behind me. I spun, flashlight beam wobbling. Empty space. Just the keening wind and the frantic thrum of my own pulse. My breathing grew shallow. Grass whispered against my boots. Retreating towards the porch steps, my eyes snagged on another dark form near the tree line. This one seemed to float, or perhaps dance, tethered to the gale. I fought to hold the light steady on it, but the moment the beam found its mark, it winked out of existence. Holding my breath, I scanned again. Everything appeared normal, deceptively so. I scrambled up the steps, nearly stumbling on the last, legs trembling uncontrollably. Inside, the locks clicked home with desperate finality. I double-checked each window latch. The ensuing nights fell into a grim pattern. Sunset unleashed the wind. Whispers seeped through the walls, sometimes teasing the edge of coherence, but never resolving into words. Earplugs proved futile. A low vibration still hummed through the window panes. Each morning, walk revealed new patterns gouged into the grass, spreading across the lawn in cryptic arrangements of curves and wavy lines. Not random, purposeful, yet indecipherable. My phone camera struggled to capture their true nature. The photos showed flattened grass, but the precise, unsettling detail of the marks remained elusive, softened by the lens. One afternoon, hoping for clarity, I invited Elias over. He was a local handyman, pragmatic, familiar with the area's wildlife and weather lore. I described the wind's uncanny voice, the strange calligraphy on the lawn. Skepticism etched his features. We walked the grounds together. He acknowledged the markings, but offered prosaic theories. Soil creep, maybe erratic deer. I counted, highlighting the depth, the scraping quality. He shrugged, unconvinced. We settled at my kitchen table with beers as dusk bled into night. The wind rose, a familiar overture. Elias paused mid-sip, head tilted. A flicker of something, concern, crossed his face. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice hushed. "Under the wind?" Affirmation lodged in my throat. Relief warred with dread. Finally, corroboration. He set down his beer. "Let's go look." Armed with flashlights, we stepped into the buffeting dark. The wind stung, bringing tears. Elias stood close, his beam sweeping. After a moment, a sharp gesture, he leaned in, whispering about movement near the tree line. Both beams converged. I glimpsed it. A flicker, a pulse of shadow dancing erratically with the gusts. Elias edged forward. A primal urge to stop him fought with a desperate need to see. We crept closer, bootfalls swallowed by the wind, hearts hammering. Suddenly, Elias's light stuttered, died, fled again. He muttered a curse. Where the shape had been, only wind-whipped grass remained. He turned, face pale even in the gloom, a sheen of sweat on his brow despite the chill. Words failed him for a moment. "Inside," he finally managed, his voice strained. He left shortly after, promising thought, admitting uncertainty, conceding the wrongness of what we'd witnessed. The lock felt colder in my trembling hand that night. Alone again, the whispers seemed to press closer, amplified, insistent. A phantom presence breathed at my back. My own flashlight beam, sweeping the empty room, offered no solace. Days blurred. Work became a refuge I couldn't fully inhabit, my thoughts perpetually snagged on those fleeting shapes. Nightfall invariably brought the wind's crescendo. The patterns multiplied, one morning stretching like bizarre tendrils clear to the dirt road accessing town. Inquiries among neighbors yielded little. The hill's wind was legendary. Stories of odd noises dismissed as local color. Most just shrugged, eager to change the subject. Trapped within the house, the wind became a palpable siege. Every creak, every rattle sent jolts through my system. My shoulders remained perpetually knotted, my mind fogged by sleep deprivation. Intermittent clicking sounds began emanating from the walls, sharp bursts with no discernible source. The wind sometimes battered the windows with such ferocity I expected shattering glass, yet they held, amplifying the sense of being sealed inside a box under assault. One evening, driven by desperation, I mounted a small camera on the porch, aimed at the area of recent sightings. Inside, I watched the live feed on my laptop. For hours, only the hypnotic sway of grass and wind-tormented branches filled the screen. Then, near midnight, a flicker. A rapid, dark blur streaked across the frame's corner. My stomach plummeted. Rewinding, leaning closer, I strained to make sense of it. Too fast, too indistinct. A suggestion of form, perhaps fleeting appendages, but gone before the eye could truly register. I saved the clip, replaying it in slow motion, frame by painstaking frame. Blurry, frustratingly ambiguous, yet each viewing tightened the knot of fear in my chest, my hands growing clammy on the keyboard. Logic whispered, debris, but instinct screamed, other. Dawn was breaking before I sought my bed, dreams echoing with howling wind and sibilant whispers. The following day revealed fresh scars near the back fence, a wide arc where the ground looked churned, ravaged. Crouching, I examined the disturbed soil, its damp, earthy scent sharp in the air. Fingertips traced the deepest groove. The compacted earth spoke of significant pressure, deliberate force. The image of claws scraping through the dark sent a fresh wave of adrenaline through me. I stood, wiping dirt from my hands, heart racing. Evening descended with a wind more violent than any before. It shrieked around the eaves and rattled the tin roof of the outbuilding. I paced the confines of the house, a prisoner checking his bars. By midnight, tension had become a physical ache in my muscles. Flashlight gripped tight, phone camera already recording. I stood at the back door, steeling myself. One more foray, one more attempt to capture proof. The instant the door opened, the wind struck like a physical blow, whipping my jacket. I advanced a few steps into the yard, flashlight beam dancing nervously. My phone recorded only the shudder of my own hand. The wind whistled, a high, piercing note. Then, a soft scraping, perhaps 10 feet to my right. I jerked the light source towards the sound. There, caught in the beam, a dark form, knee-high, twisting, its outline ragged and unstable in the gale. I tried to move closer, but a ferocious gust shoved me back. When I regained my footing, it was gone. My breath came in ragged gasps, palms slick. Turning back towards the sanctuary of the house, I heard it, a sibilant hiss, chillingly close, right behind me. I spun again, the flashlight beam trembling wildly. Nothing, just a roaring dark. My heart felt poised to burst. Another gust nearly felled me. Galvanized by pure terror, I sprinted, stumbling through the grass, back to the door. I slammed it shut, threw the bolt, leaning heavily against the wood, chest heaving. The flashlight felt welded to my grip, knuckles white. That night, I huddled on the floor beside the couch, listening. The wind howled, pressing against the house, making the walls groan. The whispers were louder, more insistent, seeming to claw at the window panes, seeking entry. Lights blazed, phone clutched tight, but the door remained shut. A chilling certainty solidified within me. I shared this hill. Something ancient, aware, rode the currents of the wind, its presence a tangible pressure against my skin with every gust. I watched the black windows, waiting for morning, counting the slow passage of minutes until the sky finally grayed. I remain here. The wind never ceases its relentless passage over this hill, and the shapes it carries are my nightly companions. Explanations remain elusive, evidence unconvincing to others, but I know the truth of the darkness beyond my windows. I feel the weight of those whispers. Every venture outside after dusk reveals fresh marks clawed into the earth, fleeting shadows dancing at the edge of sight. The wind is constant, and with each breath it takes across this exposed place, I feel that presence, watching, waiting. The instant awareness bloomed, a presence behind me, my reality warped, tilting strangely. That familiar ribbon of path cutting through Bishop's Green, a shortcut trod countless times, twisted suddenly into a labyrinthine menace, all elongated shadows and unseen precipices. A frantic drumbeat against my ribs. My heart urged my legs faster, the echo of alien footfalls swelling with every hurried stride. It commenced as just another Friday, dissolving into Saturday. University life meant late vigils in the library's sterile glow, wrestling with dense texts, frantic keystrokes chasing dawn-due essays. This night mirrored its predecessors. Midnight had long chimed when my laptop finally clicked shut, the campus outside steeped in an almost theatrical quietude as I aimed for my off-campus solitude. Only the dry rustle of fallen leaves skittering in the cool breeze and the distant, muted thrum of arterial roads disturbed the stillness. Never before had this route unsettled me, not even cloaked in darkness. Bishop's Green, usually adequately lit, often hosted fellow nocturnal travelers, late shift workers, insomniacs, students like myself. Tonight, though, a profound emptiness reigned. No joggers tracing determined circuits, no spectral dog walkers, not even the customary knot of smokers near the old stone fountain. Just me, adrift in silence. Halfway across the expanse, I registered it. A faint drag, shoe leather on asphalt, subtly out of cadence with my own rhythm. I halted. The sound ceased instantly. An echo, I told myself. A trick of the night. I pressed on, but there it was again. Sharper now. Undeniable. Someone shadowed me, meticulously matching my tempo. Resisting the cinematic urge to glance back, A fatal trope. I accelerated, my knuckles white where they gripped my satchel strap. Behind me, the steps quickened in perfect synchrony. Adrenaline ignited, a volatile surge through my veins. I veered sharply left, abandoning my usual trajectory. The footsteps mirrored the turn. Right, left again, another right. Each deviation proved futile. The unseen presence clung, a persistent satellite just beyond reach. My walk bled into a near run, breath tearing in ragged gasps. The park unfurled, seemingly endless, the exit dissolving into an elusive mirage. How had its dimensions escaped me until now? Panic, a clumsy navigator, steered me wrong. Instead of the welcoming egress path, I confronted a thick barricade of ancient oaks and tangled underbrush, a cul-de-sac of nature. Only then did I pivot. There, perhaps 20 feet distant, stood a shape. The park's low lamps bled pools of weak light, sculpting only a stark, motionless silhouette against the gloom. Features remained shrouded. "Who's there?" The question emerged, frayed with a tremor I couldn't suppress. "What is it you want?" Silence answered. The figure remained utterly still, a statue carved from night, its unseen gaze fixed upon me. My fingers scrabbled for my phone, a desperate reach for connection, for help. As it emerged from my pocket, slick with nervous sweat, gravity betrayed me. The device slipped, clattering onto the hard-packed earth with a sound that detonated in the profound quiet. I stooped, snatching it up, my gaze never breaking from the silhouette. In that fractional moment of distraction, the darkness reclaimed its own. The figure had evaporated. Ice water flooded my veins. Gone? Where? I spun, a frantic pirouette, eyes probing every shadow-draped recess, every rustling bush. Nothing. Emptiness yawned back. With trembling hands, I thumbed the screen alive, dialing emergency services. As the line trilled, I pressed my back against the rough bark of a tree, attempting an impossible vigilance, scanning all points of the compass simultaneously. 911. What is the nature of your emergency? A calm, detached voice, incongruously soothing. Words tumbled out, a breathless cascade detailing my terror. Stay right where you are, the operator instructed smoothly. A patrol unit is en route. Remain on the line with me until they arrive. I nodded mutely before remembering the disembodied voice couldn't see. Okay, I rasped. The ensuing minutes stretched into an eternity. Each sigh of the wind through the leaves, every distant urban murmur, jolted me. The operator's voice droned on, a steady stream of questions meant to anchor me, but the pervasive certainty of being watched clung like damp cloth. Finally, the strobing pulse of blue and red lights sliced through the trees. Relief washed over me, potent and weakening. Explaining myself again under the harsh, interrogating beams of police flashlights felt strangely diminishing. The park, illuminated thus, looked mundane, almost offensively normal. Had I conjured the phantom from fear itself? The officers listened, professionally courteous yet radiating skepticism. A thorough search yielded nothing. No footprints beyond my own, no broken twigs, no tangible trace to validate my panicked narrative. Likely just another person cutting through late, one officer offered, his tone gentle but dismissive. Easy to get spooked out here at night. I murmured agreement, yearning to accept his rational explanation, yet a deeper conviction resonated. The experience was utterly real. They offered a ride home. I accepted with profound gratitude. As the cruiser pulled away from Bishop's Green, an involuntary backward glance snagged on the tree line. For a fleeting, heart-stopping instant, I thought I glimpsed it. A solitary figure, poised at the edge of the woods, observing our departure. Sleep offered no refuge that night. Closing my eyes conjured the silhouette, replayed the disembodied footsteps. The following day, defying a primal urge to stay locked away, I returned to the park under the bold candor of daylight. Sunlight transformed the space. Families picnicked. Children shrieked with laughter. Dogs chased frisbees. Reconciling this cheerful tableau with the previous night's suffocating terror felt impossible. I retraced my panicked flight path, searching for what? Confirmation? A tangible anchor for my fear. Nearing the dead end, the copse of trees, a flicker of darkness against the green caught my eye. Lodged deep within a thorny bush, almost swallowed by leaves, lay a scrap of fabric. Dark, heavy cloth. My pulse leaped. Reaching out, my fingers brushed against it. Real. Solid proof. Someone had been there. With a surge of vindication, I tugged the fabric free, intending to present this evidence. As it came loose, revealing more of its surface, my blood chilled to absolute zero. Affixed to the ragged edge, small and stark white, was a name tag, and printed upon it, clear as the horrifying daylight, was my own name. I staggered back, mind reeling in a vortex of impossibility. This wasn't mine. I owned nothing like it, and even if I did, its presence here, precisely here. The world tilted again. A cold dread, sharp as broken glass, prickled down my spine. Slowly, compelled by a force beyond reason, I turned. Standing on the path behind me, bathed in the innocuous afternoon sun, stood the figure. The same dark silhouette, except now I saw its face, my face. The entity, my perfect replica, offered a smile. It held no warmth, only a chilling predatory curve of the lips that vibrated with malice deep within my bones. Then, while I remained frozen in raw horror, it turned with casual grace and melted back into the throng of ordinary park visitors, vanishing as if it were nothing more than a flicker of heat haze. I ran, not walked, not jogged, but fled, a blind sprint back to my apartment, the sanctuary that now felt terrifyingly fragile. Doors bolted, curtains drawn tight against the day. That was 3 rotations of the earth ago. My apartment has become my cell. Classes are missed under the guise of illness. Meals arrive in anonymous paper bags. Friends' concerned messages remain unanswered beacons on my phone screen. The threshold is a barrier I cannot breach, haunted by the certainty that it waits beyond. Sometimes, in the deepest hours of the night, soft footfalls whisper in the corridor outside my door. Measured, deliberate steps that pause just there, listening, waiting. I cannot name what I encountered in Bishop's Green. A phantom? A creature leached from some darker reality? A fractured piece of myself, given monstrous form? I only grasp its undeniable existence, its inexplicable focus on me. So I commit this account to the screen, a message in a bottle tossed into the digital sea, praying for belief, praying that should I vanish, as the cold knot in my gut insists I might, this truth remains. If you read this, if you find yourself traversing that park when the world sleeps and you perceive footsteps trailing yours, do not turn. Flee. Flee and pray that the face you eventually confront is not, terrifyingly, irrevocably, your own. Perhaps the most dreadful monster is the one that wears your reflection. Three days adrift in the fog of Ilara's vanishing, I found myself marooned in the sterile quiet of the precinct. Numbness was welcome anchor until my phone pulsed against my thigh, a vibration that seemed to rattle my very bones. A simple message glowed on the screen. "I'm fine. Stop worrying." Innocuous words, yet ice traced my veins, constricting my heart. The sender, Ilara's number, the very device Inspector Davies had confirmed, lay shattered near her abandoned vehicle, a constellation of glass and plastic on the lonely shoulder of the highway. My gaze locked onto the illuminated screen, fingers trembling. A phantom signal from a dead phone? Impossible. Ilara had evaporated en route from her studio, vanished between 1 mile marker and the next. Her car, discovered idling on that desolate ribbon of asphalt, driver's side agape, keys beckoning from the ignition like a silent invitation. No struggle etched into the scene, no violence whispered by the roadside dust, only the vehicle's hollow shell and the fragmented remains of her phone. Now, this digital ghost, whispering reassurances that felt like threats. "Everything all right, Mr. Hayes?" Inspector Davies' sharp tone sliced through my daze. Her eyes, shrewd and weary from too many such vigils, fixed on me with a flicker of concern. A knot formed in my throat, thick and obstructive. "A text," I managed, the words scraping past the sudden dryness. "From Ilara's number." Her brow arched, skepticism warring with professional curiosity. An outstretched hand demanded the device. Davy scanned the brief message, her lips thinning into a hard line. "Inconceivable," she breathed, the word barely audible. "We logged her handset into evidence hours ago. It's in pieces." Yet the impossible stared back from the screen, stark and undeniable. What ensued was a flurry of procedural motion, a whirlwind that ultimately spun itself out. Tracing the signal proved futile, the digital breadcrumbs leading only to electronic cul-de-sacs. Endless questions were volleyed my way, suspicion flickering beneath the surface of their professional demeanor. Could I, in my grief, be orchestrating this cruel theater? But my bewilderment mirrored their own frustration, a shared incomprehension in the face of the inexplicable. And the silence was broken, irrevocably. More messages materialized over the following days, spectral fragments from Ilara's supposed void. thinking of you. So very dark where I am. Finn, please help me. Each syllable was a shard of ice piercing my resolve, deepening the terrifying enigma. Sleep became a forgotten country, food tasteless ash in my mouth. My entire existence contracted to the tyranny of the phone's chime, a sound oscillating between desperate, irrational hope and paralyzing dread. Every buzz was a physical jolt, every ensuing silence a suffocating weight. A week bled into the next, each day a landscape of grey anxiety. Then a directive arrived, chillingly intimate and specific, where our lips first met. Midnight, only you. Instantly, the image surfaced, vivid and poignant. The sprawling, ancient oak in Willow Creek Park, sentinel over our nascent affections, the place our story truly began. Adrenaline surged, a frantic pulse drumming against my ribs, a counterpoint to the cold dread. This had to be it, the path back to Alara, or at least to answers. I held this revelation close, a secret guarded from the inspector and her protocols. Their caution, their very presence, might shatter this fragile, terrifying connection. No, this pilgrimage was mine alone to make. Midnight beckoned like a siren's call. I navigated the familiar paths of Willow Creek Park, now rendered alien and menacing by the hour and my desperate purpose. A gibbous moon bled pale, spectral light onto the grounds, sculpting long, disquieting shadows from familiar shapes. Benches became crouching beasts, bushes potential ambushes. Ahead, the colossal oak clawed at the star-dusted canvas of the sky, its branches like skeletal fingers. My steps were hesitant, each footfall unnaturally loud in the profound stillness. My senses strained against the quiet, scanning the gloom for any flicker of movement, any sign of Alara. Silence answered. Emptiness reigned. Alara? My voice, a thin thread swallowed by the vast quiet. Are you here? Nothing but the whisper of a breeze through the leaves. My watch face glowed. 12:01. A vibration against my palm startled me. My own phone. 2 words commanded from the screen. Look up. My breath hitched, heart pounding a frantic tattoo against my ribs. I tilted my head back, eyes tracing the gnarled architecture of the ancient oak. I saw it, suspended from a low-hanging limb, like some grotesque technological fruit. A mobile phone. Her phone, the one supposedly shattered, catalogued, inert in an evidence bag miles away. With a hesitant, trembling reach, I plucked it from the air. It felt solid, unnervingly real despite its fractured screen. As I stared, dumbfounded, the damaged display flickered erratically to life. New text bloomed across the cracked glass. Behind you. Reflexively, I spun, a strangled cry caught in my throat. Only moon-drenched emptiness and dancing shadows greeted me. The park stretched out, silent and indifferent. Another buzz from the phone clutched tightly in my hand. Not there. Here. The words were nonsensical, mocking, tightening the knot of fear in my stomach. I pivoted again, scanning the perimeter with frantic eyes, desperation clawing at me. And then perception shifted, sharpened by terror. At the tree line's edge, where the manicured park surrendered to wilder growth, a silhouette stood stark against the deeper darkness. A surge of recognition, primal and certain, shot through me. Alara. Alara! The name tore from my throat, raw with hope and fear, as I stumbled forward. "Alara, it's me, Finn." But the figure remained static, unnervingly still. Closer now, a chilling dissonance registered in my brain. The form was wrong. Unsettlingly elongated limbs hung at odd angles, and the head seemed disproportionately large atop the slender neck. A creeping wrongness, cold and visceral, slithered up my spine, choking the hope from my lungs. "Ilara," I whispered again, the name now laced with nascent horror, barely audible. The silhouette's head tilted, snapping upward at an angle that defied human anatomy. Then it smiled, a rictus stretching impossibly wide, splitting the shattered face to unveil multiple tiers of needle-sharp, glistening teeth that seemed to catch the moonlight. A wave of pure, unadulterated revulsion washed over me, paralyzing me for a heartbeat. This was no woman I loved. This was no human being at all. My heel snagged a gnarled root hidden in the grass. I crashed heavily to the earth, the impact stealing my breath in a painful gasp. Then the sound, a sound that would forever echo in the haunted chambers of my memory. Laughter, high-pitched, glacial, utterly devoid of any human warmth or mirth. It was the sound of pure predatory amusement. Panic ignited pure instinct, overriding shock. I scrambled upright, limbs fueled by a terror more profound than any I had ever known, and fled. Behind me, the rustle of pursuit through the undergrowth, that awful, chiming laughter, swelling, drawing unnervingly nearer. I erupted from the park's edge onto the blessed indifference of the asphalt street, lungs searing, legs churning with piston-like desperation. The sanctuary of my apartment building became my only goal, the only thought my panic-stricken mind could hold. I slammed the door, bolts scraping home with reassuring finality, and sagged against the wood, tremors racking my entire frame. Hours passed in a hypervigilant state of raw nerves, every creak and groan of the old building a potential intrusion, every shadow a lurking horror. With the first gray smear of dawn painting the sky, I contacted Inspector Davies. My voice shook uncontrollably as I recounted the night's impossible horrors, the spectral phone, the figure beneath the oak, the impossible smile, the inhuman chase. She listened, her tone professionally placid, yet underscored with a current of profound disbelief I couldn't ignore. A subsequent, thorough search of Willow Creek Park yielded nothing. No anomalous footprints disturbed the dew-kissed grass, no sign of Alara, no creature lurking in the shadows, and the phone I'd clutched, Alara's spectral device resurrected only to vanish again. Gone, as if it had been a hallucination woven from grief and exhaustion all along. "Mr. Hayes," Davies suggested later, her voice softened with clinical pity. "Perhaps the strain, the trauma, counseling might be beneficial under these circumstances." "I'm not inventing this," I retorted, the words cracking under the weight of my terror and frustration. "I saw it. It was real." But even as denial left my lips, the insidious tendrils of doubt began to coil within me. Had the grief, the sleeplessness, the sheer unrelenting wrongness of it all finally fractured my sanity? That evening, cocooned in the fragile, illusory safety of my apartment, my own phone, the one I hadn't yet discarded, vibrated one final fateful time. A picture message from Alara's number. Dread, cold and absolute, settled in the pit of my stomach like lead. My thumb hovered, trembling, over the notification. Could I bear witness to whatever fresh hell awaited? A shuddering breath, a moment of grim resolve, then I tapped. The image resolved on the screen, and the floor seemed to disintegrate beneath me, plunging me into an abyss. It was Ilara, captured in a selfie, her familiar beautiful smile radiant, heartbreakingly normal. But the background, reflected with chilling clarity in a looking glass behind her, stood the entity from the park. Its horrifying, tooth-filled grin stretched wide, a silent, mocking scream aimed directly at me. One of its impossibly long, malformed arms rested possessively, almost casually, across Ilara's shoulder. Below the image, a caption typed in stark white letters, "Catch you later, Finn." Sleep is a luxury I no longer afford myself. My phone lies buried deep within the city's anonymous refuse, my landline disconnected as a futile precaution. Mirrors hang shrouded in heavy cloth throughout my apartment, denying any surface its reflective power. Futile gestures, I know. It's merely biding its time, playing with its food. Sometimes, drifting on the ragged edge of consciousness, I fancy I hear a faint phantom ringing from the dumpster down the street. Ilara's unique, cheerful ringtone, now a harbinger of doom. And occasionally, a fleeting glimpse caught in a darkened windowpane, a rain-slicked street reflecting the streetlights. I see it. That impossible rictus grin, those serried teeth, those ancient, knowing eyes. What truly became of Ilara remains a gaping wound of unknowing, a question that festers without answer. What that thing is, what it desires beyond torment. These questions echo in the hollow spaces grief left behind. I know only this with chilling certainty. It watches, it waits, and its terrible, patient attention is now fixed entirely on me. So, should a message ever flicker onto your screen, from a number long silent, from someone presumed lost to the world, let it remain unanswered. Resist the desperate urge to meet, to seek closure where none exists, and never, ever look over your shoulder when you feel unseen eyes upon you. Some disappearances aren't meant to be solved. Some voids are best left unexplored, and the thing that finds you in their wake is infinitely, unimaginably worse than any grief. Riverbend, Ohio, beckoned, not with grandeur, but the quiet promise of focus, a haven for solitary work. The house Elias claimed stood weathered, a 2-story relic whose bones, though groaning underfoot, felt fundamentally sound. Character bled from its peeling paint and draughty sashes. Below lay the cellar, an unfamiliar feature, destined, he mused, for forgotten boxes or perhaps the sawdust dreams of a future workshop. Weeks dissolved into the rhythm of settling, the Tetris of furniture, the archaeology of packed crates. The basement door remained mostly shut, breached only once to consign unwanted baggage to the lower dark. A breath of stagnant earthen air, the scent of decades undisturbed, met him then, dismissed as the quaint perfume of age. Until the quiet fractured, sleep hovered, a breath away, when a sound surfaced from the depths, faint yet distinct, of friction, a dry skitter-scrape, as if stone rasped against stone. Elias jolted upright, the pulse in his ears a frantic drum, against the sudden stillness. Silence flooded back. Just the house, he reasoned, settling its ancient joints, the groan of plumbing. Then, undeniable, it returned, that soft, rhythmic abrasion emanating unmistakably from the cellar below. Gooseflesh prickled his arms as he slipped from bed, navigating the shadowed artery of the hallway towards the kitchen's meager glow. A breath, held and released, a futile attempt at composure before twisting the knob. The cellar exhaled its dampness, a tangible presence, colder now, slithering up his spine. His fingers found a switch. A frail bulb flickered to life, casting a sickly yellow patina only on the uppermost steps. "Hello." The word was a tremor in the air, swallowed by the waiting quiet. He strained his ears, catching only the low thrum of the refrigerator, the house's own resting heartbeat. Absurd. He was conjuring phantoms from settling timbers. Retreating, he secured the door, yet the disquiet clung to him like the cellar's musty scent. The following evening, amidst the flickering blue light of the television, the sound resurfaced. A persistent, measured scrape, scrape, scrape from beneath the floorboards. Elias silenced the screen, listening intently, his pulse stumbling, unmistakable. The deliberate cadence suggested more than random settling. It hinted at agency. He rose, muscles taut, drawn towards the basement door. His hand paused inches from the knob, a primal warning screaming retreat. Yet, the not knowing gnawed deeper than the fear. He surrendered. The door swung inward, releasing an almost suffocating wave of damp earth. The weak bulb fought against the gloom, illuminating the stairs, but leaving the depths shrouded. "Anyone there?" His voice wavered, thin against the profound silence. Taking a steadying breath, he descended, each footfall swallowed by the creak of aging wood. At the bottom, the meager light threw distorted shadows that danced like specters. The space was vacant, populated only by his discarded boxes and skeletal remains of the previous owner's furniture. Yet, standing amidst the clutter, a palpable cold seeped into his bones. The air felt viscous, charged, as if the darkness itself held its breath, watching. A presence, unseen but acutely felt, resided in the Stygian corners. He retreated hastily up the steps, heart hammering, the click of the lock echoing his desperate need for a barrier. Whether delusion or something else entirely, the conviction settled. He was not the sole occupant of this house. Subsequent nights brought an escalation. The scraping persisted, now often joined by the ponderous tread of footsteps echoing from the concrete floor below. Slow, deliberate, back and forth. Then came the whispers, insidious susurrations just beyond the threshold of hearing, words lost, but their chilling proximity raising the fine hairs on his neck. Sleep became a besieged fortress. Lights blazed throughout the night, locks were double-checked, windows secured, but the flimsy defenses offered no solace. Night after night, the subterranean symphony continued. The rasp, the tread, the sibilant murmurs. Elias lay rigid in his bed, a prisoner of his own home, pulse thundering against the oppressive silence between the sounds. Exhaustion frayed his nerves raw. Sleep deprivation and gnawing terror demanded resolution. One night, resolve hardening through the fear, Elias knew he had to confront whatever lurked below, be it phantom or flesh. Flashlight clutched in a trembling hand, he approached the basement door like a man condemned. He paused, the frantic beat of his heart echoing in the stillness. took a ragged breath, then unlocked and pushed. The beam sliced through the oppressive dark, the weak overhead bulb offering little assistance. He descended, the protesting shrieks of the stairs amplifying his dread. The flashlight's arc swept across the familiar scene: stacked boxes, derelict furniture, bare concrete walls. Nothing seemed amiss, until his gaze snagged on the far corner. Near the damp stained back wall, a patch of profound darkness marred the floor. A stain. Drawn by a morbid curiosity that overrode his fear, he moved closer, the beam tightening on the spot. It was wet, darkly viscous, glistening obscenely under the light. Fresh. He knelt, hesitated, then extended a tentative finger. The contact sent an icy jolt through his entire body. Blood. He scrambled backward, revulsion and terror warring within him. The flashlight beam jittered wildly as he scanned every recess, every shadow, desperate for a source, an explanation. The cellar remained stubbornly empty. He fled up the stairs, his breath catching in ragged sobs, slamming the door and fumbling with the lock, sealing the horror below. Rational thought fractured. Was he losing his grip, or had he stumbled into something truly malevolent? The distinction scarcely mattered. Staying was unthinkable. Keys, phone, essentials snatched in a blind panic, and he was out, bursting into the night air, the house looming silent and menacing behind him. He drove, autopilot engaged, ending up on the doorstep of Micah, the closest thing to an anchor in this new town. Recounting the events felt like uttering lunacy, and the skepticism in Micah's eyes confirmed it, but Elias clung to the chilling certainty of his senses. The next day, fortified by his friend's reluctant presence, they returned. They descended into the cellar, Elias bracing for the stain, but the concrete floor lay uniformly gray and dusty, utterly unmarked. The blood, like a figment of a nightmare, had vanished. Weeks later, Elias moved, abandoning the house and its suffocating secrets. The feeling of being watched, however, proved harder to leave behind. He never found an explanation, forever suspended between the possibility of a haunted mind and a haunted house. Yet sometimes, drifting in the liminal space before sleep, the old echoes return, a faint, rhythmic scraping from unseen depths, the whisper of phantom footsteps, sensations crawling unbidden across his skin, sharp and cold as cellar air. It snagged my gaze the moment I stepped across the threshold of the cluttered antique emporium, an old grandfather clock relegated to a shadowy alcove. Tall, fashioned from some somber, near-black wood, its glass face revealed hands inertly fixed at the zenith of midnight. An undeniable wrongness emanated from it, a subtle discord in the dusty air. The proprietor, observing my focus, materialized nearby. No artisan could mend it, he murmured, a derelict beyond reclamation. His caution was lost on me. Its very presence, stark and silent, held an irresistible gravity. Though I profess no belief in the spectral, that evening found me cradling the clock's considerable weight, departing the shop with a nameless disquiet settling deep within my bones. Night had fully claimed the city by the time I reached my apartment, the digital clock on the microwave blinking 9 gone p.m. With some effort, I maneuvered the timepiece into the living room, propping its bulk against the wall adjacent to the sofa. The room swam in low light, and the clock's dial seemed to possess a vacant, watchful quality in the gloom. I rubbed tired eyes, attributing the sensation to the day's drain. My phone, nearly depleted, found its charger by the wall outlet. Seeking to dispel the unsettling perception of unseen company, I activated more lamps, bathing the space in a slightly harsher glow. Silence reigned, punctuated only by the refrigerator's low thrum from the kitchen and the faint electrical sigh of the hallway fixture. Yet, despite the mundane symphony, my attention kept snagging on the clock. Minutes were spent in scrutiny. Dust lay thick upon its shoulders, the dark wood scarred along its edges like old wounds. The glass panel protecting the face, however, remained curiously clear, affording an unobstructed view of the twin hands, paralyzed precisely at 12. No pulse of life stirred within its casing. A tentative nudge to the brass pendulum elicited only a brief, reluctant sway before it hung utterly still once more. A faint coolness, unrelated to the ambient temperature, brushed my skin. Shaking my head, I resolved to sideline the enigma for now. Hunger gnawed, and the promise of rest beckoned. Leftover pasta, resurrected by the microwave's hum, became my solitary meal on the sofa. The clock stood sentinel to my right, a towering silhouette I consciously tried and failed to fully ignore. Around 10:30, the television screen went dark. The familiar rituals of winding down commenced. Teeth brushed, a change into sleep clothes, a simple t-shirt and shorts. I remembered the fleeting luminescence of my phone screen. 10:46 p.m. Then, darkness as the bedside lamp clicked off. Sleep claimed me swiftly, within minutes. Consciousness returned, wrenched from slumber by the tolling of profound chimes. Each note resonated, slow and ponderous, possessing the ancient weight of cathedral bells. Disoriented, I initially dismissed it as the fabric of a dream. My bedroom lay submerged in absolute black. Across the room, the numerals on my digital alarm clock glowed a hazy crimson, 12 a.m. Then the second chime struck, a vibration that seemed to shudder through the very walls. Bolting upright on my elbows, my heart launched into a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The chimes persisted, counting out 12 deliberate, sonorous beats. With every resonant clang, a vice tightened around my chest, my breathing turning shallow and quick. By the final echo, I was starkly awake, drenched in a cold sweat. My fingers, trembling violently, fumbled for the light switch, nearly upsetting the lamp in their clumsy haste. Light flooded the room, revealing familiar surroundings, yet the air itself felt altered, charged. The fine hairs on my arms prickled upright. The realization struck with chilling certainty. The chimes originated from the grandfather clock downstairs. The broken clock, the inert clock. A fresh surge of adrenaline sent my heart hammering as I swung my legs over the side of the bed. Crossing the threshold into the hallway, I registered a distinct, cool draft caressing my bare skin, though every window remained securely shut. The living room door stood slightly ajar. Pushing it wider revealed a space dominated by shadows. The only illumination spilled weakly from the small hallway lamp behind me. There, near the sofa, stood the clock's imposing outline. Its face remained steadfastly fixed at midnight, the pendulum immobile. Nothing stirred. Swallowing proved difficult. My throat constricted. The chill intensified. I crept forward, each slow step punctuated by the protesting creak of the floorboards beneath my bare feet. Another wave of frigid air washed over me. It was then I noticed the shadows. They seemed unnaturally elongated, stretching like grasping tendrils from the room's corners towards its center, towards me. I blinked rapidly, convinced it was a trick of tired eyes, but the distortions held. My gaze darted to the clock, half expecting animation, ticking hands, a swinging pendulum, but it remained a monument to stillness. My phone, clutched in my hand, displayed 12:01 a.m. I tapped the screen, wondering if it had frozen. It illuminated brightly, the time unchanged. I waited, holding my breath for the minute to advance. It refused. Time itself felt snagged, the entire apartment pinned to this single, impossible moment after midnight. Even the familiar drone of the refrigerator seemed muffled, distant. In the profound quiet, I felt acutely aware of my own movement, the sole animate thing in a frozen tableau. Then, the distinct sensation of presence. No other word suffices. An awareness, profound and unnerving, of not being alone. My chest tightened further. I spun around, sweeping the beam of my phone's flashlight across the furniture. The sofa sat undisturbed. The coffee table held only a stray magazine. The corner lamp remained unlit. But near the window, one corner seemed denser. Not a shape, precisely, but an area where the shadows pooled, unnaturally deep. The phantom breeze intensified, brushing my arms like icy fingertips. My pulse throbbed, a frantic drumbeat in my ears. I stood rooted to the spot, skin tingling, mouth arid. It was the primal certainty of being observed from behind, even when facing an empty space. I held the phone steady, light spearing the corner. Only darkness answered. My legs felt weighted, refusing the command to investigate closer. Instead, I edged towards the clock again, driven by a desperate need for a rational anchor. Perhaps a hidden battery, a forgotten mechanism triggering the chimes. My heart pounded a heavy cadence against my ribs as I forced my fingers to grasp the side panel. The wood felt unnervingly smooth, colder than the surrounding air. I eased the front panel open. The pendulum hung motionless. Inside, dust and stillness reigned. No hidden gears, no battery compartment, nothing but the derelict viscera of a broken clockwork. Yet, as I peered closer, a faint odor reached me, the scent of decaying paper, of old books forgotten in a damp cellar. It clung specifically to the clock's interior, absent from the rest of the room. Closing the panel, I retreated a step, rubbing at the goose flesh erupting on my arms. My phone's screen stubbornly declared it was still 12:01 a.m. From the shadowed corner, a soft rustling sound whispered through the silence. My breath hitched. It was faint, like fabric brushing against plaster. I pivoted, flashlight beam stabbing towards the source. It illuminated the empty corner, the heavy curtain draped over the window, its only occupant. The curtain stirred, swaying gently, though no window was open, no draft present to cause its movement. My heart hammered against my sternum, a primal urge to flee screaming through my veins. Then abruptly, the atmosphere shifted. The oppressive cold vanished, replaced by the room's normal, ambient temperature. The curtain ceased its spectral dance. My phone screen flickered, the time jumping instantly to 12:02 a.m. The tension snapped like a frayed wire. The refrigerator's hum resumed its familiar drone. The house exhaled, returning to the present. I didn't hesitate. I fled back to my bedroom, slamming the door and twisting the lock. Sleep was impossible. I remained sitting rigidly in bed until nearly 2 a.m, repeatedly checking my phone, seeking reassurance in the steady progression of minutes. Exhaustion eventually dragged me under. Morning arrived with a dull ache behind my eyes and a crick in my neck. My alarm shrilled at 7 a.m. As I dragged myself from bed, the previous night's events flooded back, leaving me shaky and disoriented. Steeling myself, I ventured into the living room. The clock stood exactly as I'd left it, hands eternally pointing to 12. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, casting the room in a deceptively peaceful light. Perhaps I'd magnified things in the dark. My phone confirmed the time. 7:05 a.m. Everything appeared utterly normal. In the kitchen, the ritual of making coffee provided a fragile anchor to reality. I scrolled through emails, attempting distraction, but my thoughts kept circling back. The resonant chimes, the creeping shadows, the chilling certainty of being watched. The impulse to return the clock warred with a stubborn curiosity. Discarding it felt like abandoning an unfinished, terrifying chapter. I couldn't simply walk away. Instead, I found the number for a local horologist. The man on the line, his voice brisk, scheduled an appointment for the following week, the earliest available. I accepted. The ensuing days adhered to their usual rhythm: work, commute, evenings at home. Daylight hours remained blessedly uneventful, but each night, as the cusp of midnight approached, the dread returned, and precisely at 12, the chimes would begin. 12 solemn tolls echoing through the apartment. The familiar cold would seep into the air. The silence would deepen. Shadows would writhe and stretch. My phone screen would invariably freeze for a minute, perhaps two. The duration was brief, yet paralyzing. Turning on every light offered no defense. Draping the clock in a heavy blanket failed to mute the chimes. Even relocating it to a distant closet at the end of the hall proved futile. The tolling persisted. The shadows gathered in every corner regardless. It became a grim, nightly ritual. The inert pendulum, the funereal bells of a clock impossibly alive. On the 5th night, a desperate idea formed. As the first chime resonated, I fumbled my phone open, launching the stopwatch application. My thumb hovered, trembling, over the start button. With the second chime, I pressed it. The digits remained fixed, 00, 0, 0. The world outside my skin seemed to pause, suspended, a knot twisted in my gut. I muttered a curse, my mouth suddenly dry as dust. From the direction of the hallway, near the closet where the clock now resided, came a faint, dry scraping sound. The hairs on my nape prickled. The chimes continued their inexorable count. My gaze fixed on the closet door. I knew I had shut it securely earlier, yet now it stood open. Just a crack, a sliver of darkness visible within. I stared, teeth clenched, an icy sweat tracing a path down my spine. The scraping ceased precisely as the 12th chime faded. Simultaneously, my stopwatch flickered to life. 0001, 0002. Normalcy crashed back in. I collapsed to my knees, gasping for air, heart thrashing wildly, a high-pitched ringing in my ears. Vertigo threatened to pull me under. A violent urge surged, to drag the clock out and shatter it into 1,000 pieces. But a deeper fear stayed my hand, the worry that destruction might only escalate things, unleash whatever entity was tethered to it. Shaking, I rose and paced the living room, forcing deep breaths until the adrenaline subsided. The remainder of the night passed in silence, though sleep offered little refuge. A few days later, the clock repairman arrived. Mr. Silas, a precise middle-aged man with keen eyes, carried a small, worn leather toolkit. My anxiety was a palpable thing as I led him to the closet and, with profound reluctance, drew out the grandfather clock. He gave it a cursory appraisal, then efficiently opened the front panel. His examination of the internal mechanism was brief. He straightened up, shaking his head slowly. "The movement's completely ceased," he stated flatly. "Looks like someone's been inside, made a real hash of it." "Frankly, Mr. Elias," I supplied. "Frankly, Elias, there's nothing salvageable here." He pointed out missing components, rusted gears. "Could it possibly chime?" I asked, dreading the answer. He chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. "This? Absolutely not. Couldn't happen. The chime rods are present, yes, but the striking train is fractured beyond repair. Impossible." I thanked him, paid his fee for the consultation. After he departed, the knot in my stomach tightened into a cold fist. Some part of me had desperately clung to the hope of a logical, mechanical fault. Now, I was left with the stark, irrefutable knowledge: the clock could not chime. And yet, every night it did. Every night, time fractured around it. That evening, I resolved to capture proof. Around 11:30 p.m., I positioned my phone on a small tripod in the living room, lens aimed squarely at the clock. I extinguished the overhead light, leaving only a single small lamp casting long shadows, ensuring the clock remained visible. I initiated the recording, then retreated to the hallway, positioning myself to peer around the corner. The wait began. My heart pounded a familiar rhythm of dread as the minutes crawled towards midnight. At precisely 11:59 p.m., the lamp flickered erratically. The first chime sounded. The wave of unnatural cold washed over me. In my hand, the phone I held displayed 11:59, frozen. I counted the chimes aloud, my voice a shaky whisper, my entire body rigid with tension. The air grew thick, heavy. By the 12th chime, sweat beaded on my forehead. The faint, musty odor of old decay filled my nostrils. The urge to scream, to run, was immense, but I remained rooted. Then, the snap back to reality. My phone's time jumped to 12:01 a.m. I hurried into the living room, stopping the recording. Hands shaking, I initiated playback. The video ran normally until the timestamp hit 11:59. Then the image froze, a single static frame of the clock face. It remained frozen for what felt like half a minute before abruptly jumping forward to 12:01. The audio track was barren, absolute silence where the chimes should have been. Nothing was captured but the temporal anomaly itself. A glitch in reality the camera could only register as missing time. The chilling truth settled. This phenomenon was mine alone, intimately bound to the clock, impervious to documentation. I was trapped within its nightly performance. Every midnight, the 12 chimes would sound, the cold would descend, the shadows would lengthen and writhe, and time itself would stutter and stall. Something unseen shared my apartment during those stolen moments. I never glimpsed it, only felt its oppressive proximity. Smashing the clock felt like courting disaster, yet keeping it meant cohabiting with a silent, recurring menace. Ultimately, I carried the clock to the garage, burying it behind stacks of forgotten boxes and dusty relics. That first night, sequestered away, the chimes still echoed through the house at midnight. The spectral wind still ghosted through the rooms, raising gooseflesh despite the distance. I sat on my bed, fists clenched, overwhelmed by a sense of utter powerlessness. After the 12th chime faded, time lurched forward. I didn't bother investigating. I knew the clock would be precisely as I left it, untouched, hands fixed at 12, a silent, mocking sentinel. Now, each night unfolds with grim predictability. I hear the chimes commence, and for that brief, suspended interval, the world outside my senses pauses. My phone becomes inert, calls impossible, messages unsent. I feel the presence, sometimes seemingly just beyond the bedroom door, sometimes lurking near the living room threshold, always unseen, always there. I lock my door, hold my breath, and count the tolls, waiting for the 12th. A grim familiarity has settled in, yet the dread never fully recedes. My chest still constricts with each nightly visitation. One part of me screams to douse it in petrol, to haul it to the curb for some other unfortunate soul to find. But a deeper, colder fear holds me captive. The fear that the entity tied to the clock is now tied to me. That disposal would change nothing. Sometimes I stare into the darkness and wonder if this is my forever. Always midnight, always the chimes, trapped in this repeating sliver of fractured time. Thus far, no physical harm has befallen me, but the constant erosion of fear takes its toll. My hands tremble more readily now. Restful sleep is a forgotten luxury. I'm committing this account to paper, driven by a desperate need for someone, somewhere, to know. The old grandfather clock remains in the garage, its hands eternally locked at midnight, and I still hear it chime. I possess no understanding of how to sever this connection, how to break the cycle. All that remains is to wait. Wait for whatever dwells in those moments between seconds to finally reveal itself, or pray for it to simply cease. Until then, night after night, I brace myself for midnight. The digital numerals bled crimson across the console display. 1:02 a.m., their faint luminescence painting the quiescent emergency dispatch hub in strokes of unease. Night shifts, usually a refuge of predictable quietude, held a certain solace for me. Tonight, however, that fragile peace was destined to shatter, fractured by a voice emerging from the wires, a voice that would resonate deep within my marrow. My name is Ilara. For half a decade, the rhythms of crisis have pulsed through my headset. I am a conduit for panic, a translator of desperation. Heart failures, break-ins, the frantic gasps of the injured. I navigated the spectrum of human vulnerability, yet nothing could have girded me for the call that slithered into the unusual stillness of this particular night, a night marked only by trivialities until that moment. My coffee, tepid in its neglect, was nearing my lips when the insistent summons rang out. I answered, the practiced calm coating my voice. 911, state your emergency. Silence hung for a beat, pregnant and heavy, before a man's tone, unnervingly level, seeped through the line. I see you, Ilara. A visceral tremor traced my spine. The anonymity of my role, my name. How? My gaze swept the vacant workstations, the familiar space suddenly vast and porous, leaving me utterly exposed. Sir, this channel is reserved for emergencies. If you require assistance. He sliced through my protocol. Cerulean blue sweater, the coffee mug. A gift, wasn't it? From your daughter's pottery class last year. Ice flooded my veins. An involuntary reflex made me clutch the fabric over my chest, a futile shield against an unseen observer. Who is this? My voice. I fought to keep it from fraying. How could you possibly know that? A low chuckle resonated, crawling over my skin like something noxious. I've been an admirer for some time, Alara. You possess a certain captivation. My thoughts scattered, grasping for logic. A cruel prank. A colleague tested boundaries. No. A certainty colder than the chill in my limbs insisted this was something else. Something deeply malignant. Sir, I will terminate this connection if... Don't! The word snapped, sharp as fractured glass. You wouldn't dare hang up. Our interaction has only just commenced. I swallowed against the dryness in my throat, my finger hovering, trembling slightly, above the trace initiation button. What is it you want? A diversion, he replied, the cadence lightening into something almost playful. You appreciate games, Alara, don't you? I've observed. Scrabble, on the back patio, with your husband. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. He knew my home. He had witnessed my private life, my family. Nausea churned within me. I'm contacting the authorities, I stated, injecting a bravado I didn't feel. Laughter again. But you are the authorities, Alara. Their voice, their ears, their tether to hope. Who, I wonder, serves as yours? My finger depressed the button. A silent prayer winged its way into the electronic ether. Let it be fast. Listen, I don't know who you are, or what distorted purpose drives you, but I've made my intentions clear, he countered, impatience roughening his tone. A game, and participation is mandatory. What followed was an hour stretched thin on the rack of psychological torment. He navigated the labyrinth of my existence with chilling intimacy, daily rituals, family anecdotes, fragments of childhood memory no stranger could possess. Each disclosure tightened the knot of fear, amplified the corrosive sense of violation. I strained to keep him engaged, feeding the trace precious seconds, while my colleagues, alerted by the palpable tension radiating from my console, worked desperately behind the scenes. But he was elusive, a phantom ricocheting through the digital network, his signal bouncing like a ghost. Why? The question escaped me, barely a whisper. Because I am able, came the simple, devastating reply. Because witnessing your composure unravel, seeing the terror bloom as your perceived security evaporates, it provides a certain satisfaction. Tears pricked, hot and sharp, but I forced them back. I would not grant him the spectacle of my breaking. You're twisted, I spat, and when we locate you, if, he amended smoothly, a significant contingency, wouldn't you agree? I remain perpetually ahead, Elara, always observing, always attuned. As if punctuating his claim, my personal mobile vibrated on the desk. With hands that shook, I retrieved it. A single text message glowed. Look outside. Against every instinct screaming denial, my head turned towards the window overlooking the employee parking lot. There, silhouetted against the sodium lights, stood a figure near the perimeter fence. Distance blurred details, but not enough to obscure the object in their hand. A phone. Oh dear God, I breathed. Divinity offers no sanctuary now, the voice murmured through the landline. Only I hold that power. I watched, paralyzed by horror, as the distant figure lifted an arm in a slow, mocking wave. What do you want from me? I pleaded, the dam of my control finally bursting. I told you, Elara, to play, and the game. It's only just beginning. The line clicked dead. For an instant, I remained suspended in the vacuum of shock. Then, the surge of adrenaline ignited action. My voice, raw and urgent, summoned my supervisor, Marcus. Words tumbled out, painting the horrifying picture. The building plunged into lockdown. Patrol units converged, sweeping the grounds. But the parking lot yielded nothing. The figure had dissolved into the tenebrous night, leaving no trace, like an apparition. The ensuing hours blurred into a montage of police reports, frantic reviews of security feeds that showed nothing substantial, nothing tangible. The caller was smoke, an echo. As dawn painted the sky in bruised pastels, I sat huddled in the break room, a coarse blanket around my shoulders, a fresh mug warming my numb hands. Marcus occupied the chair opposite, his expression deeply troubled. We'll get him, Elara, he promised, his voice low but firm. Every resource is dedicated to this. I offered a vacant nod, unconvinced. A chilling premonition whispered that this ordeal was far from concluded, and it wasn't. Over the days that followed, the calls persisted, sometimes finding me at the console, sometimes violating the sanctity of my home. Always different numbers, always untraceable. No overt threats were ever voiced, yet the message screamed from the silence between his words. I see you, always. My existence became a landscape of fear. Every unexpected noise made me jump. Every peripheral movement caused me to flinch. Sleep offered no escape. Appetite vanished. The perpetual dread gnawed relentlessly. Security systems bristled around my house. My family was relocated to safety with relatives. But the intrusions continued. Phantom punctures in my fragile reality, constant reminders of my utter vulnerability. A week after the initial violation, alone in the house that now felt cavernous and unnervingly resonant with every creak, my phone rang. Trembling fingers accepted the call, already knowing. "Hello, Alara," the familiar silken voice purred. "Did you miss our conversations?" "Please," I whispered, the last vestiges of my resilience crumbling into dust. "Just tell me what you want. Anything. Just leave me alone." A protracted silence stretched across the line. Then, unexpectedly, a sigh. "Oh, Elara, is it not apparent? This was what I wanted, to dismantle you, to expose the fragility of your perceived safety, your illusion of control." Why me? The tears flowed freely now, hot tracks on my cheeks. "Because you embodied all that I hold in contempt," he answered, his voice devoid of its earlier playfulness, now flat and cold. Order, security, the naive faith that a telephone call can erect a barrier against the world's darkness. You needed showing. And now, I held my breath, anticipating the next turn of the screw. Now, a final chilling chuckle. Now the game concludes. The lesson is learned, is it not, Elara? You will never reside fully in safety again. The line went dead, this time for good. He kept his word. The call ceased. The police investigation eventually stalled, leaving behind only cold trails and unanswered questions. Slowly, painstakingly, fragments of normalcy reassembled themselves. I returned to the dispatch center. My family cautiously came home. The planet continued its indifferent spin, but he had been irrevocably right about one thing. The sensation of true safety was lost to me, perhaps forever. Every ringing phone, every fleeting shadow, every floorboard groaning in the night carried the phantom echo of his voice, the ghost of that terror. Whether he still watches from some unseen vantage point, I cannot know. A part of me suspects he does, a permanent fixture in the periphery of my awareness, but I refuse to surrender my life to the dominion of that fear. I'm a survivor, forged in that fire, not merely its victim. And though the scars remain indelible marks on my psyche, they will not dictate my future. That is the ultimate triumph I can claim over him. To live, to seek joy, to find meaning despite the damage inflicted. Every time I answer the 911 line now, every soul I guide through the darkest moment reaffirms my purpose, not because the world is inherently safe, but precisely because it isn't, and because people like me are here, striving, call by painstaking call, to carve out small pockets of security in the encroaching shadows